Earlier this week, Shania Twain provoked outrage by expressing the wrong view. The wrong view was voiced by the Canadian singer in answer to a journalist's question about Donald Trump. The Guardian newspaper, in a bid to inject Donald Trump into every story in the news cycle, asked for Twain's opinion of the US president. This follows a pattern in which the media's celebrity-obsessed outrage is pitted against Donald Trump, an outrage-obsessed celebrity. This mixture of celebrity-obsessed outrage and an outrage-obsessed celebrity is, of course, a rancid cocktail of spite, shame, and cortisol swilled down by each of us as we scroll through our internet news feeds. This was the context in which Shania Twain was invited to comment on global politics. In ordinary circumstances, that sentence would sound absurd, yet we do in fact live in a world in which the highest office on earth is held by a reality TV star, so I guess all bets are off. Twain, caught off guard by the question, decided to answer it, venturing into realms significantly beyond her sphere of greatest competence, that is, listing things that don't impress her much. So the singer candidly proffered her own view of Donald Trump, which would be fine, except that it was the wrong view. Reflecting the outlook of fully half the US electorate, she said that she would have voted for the man, sparking banshee-like howls across the Twitter sphere. The crisis has caused many social media users to question whether they can ever again trust the political opinions of pop stars. Many tweeters, having unfollowed every account that might possibly espouse the wrong view, found their safe spaces violated by Shania's triggering words. One devastated fan tweeted, and I'm not making this up, quote, "Shania Twain came out as a Trump supporter. How could my mother betray me like this? This is the worst day of my life." In response, Twain issued a series of tweets apologizing profusely for espousing the wrong view. After seeking forgiveness, she wrote, "I make music to bring people together. My path will always be one of inclusivity." Inclusion, you see, a trending hashtag and our highest god. Onlookers were left to wonder whether it was Twain herself who was desperately seeking inclusion, offering to mouth whatever orthodoxies the baying crowd might demand. Since the singer has recanted the wrong view, the Twitchfork mob are largely placated. For now. With the boundaries of acceptable thought policed and transgressors shamed into submission, order has been restored to the Twitterverse. This, of course, is what is meant by inclusion. It's April 24th, this is Speak Life, and you're watching the LIVEcast.
LIVEcast, LIVEcast, welcome to the LIVEcast, 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 welcome to the show. LIVEcast, LIVEcast, welcome to the LIVEcast, 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 welcome to the show.
So there you have it.
Do you ever get the feeling it's going to be one of those days, technology-wise, where nothing's going to work and it's all going Pete-tong already?
Well,
have we moved this camera somehow as well? In
somehow,
in the space of...
Or somehow the studio is rotated. I think it has. Let me allow me.
We have had an absolute mare trying to get this stuff all sorted, and hence why at the beginning there I've played the wrong video, or the unedited video.
The unedited. Yeah. Because usually it's just one take Scrivs.
Normally,
isn't it?
normally it's so slick, you know.
Yeah, that's my nickname. One take Scrivs. Not today. So anyway,
we've not been here for a few weeks. We're so we're so rusty. That's what
totally
it is. That's our
rusty.
excuse.
So, do you like us? Do you like what we've done? We're desperately needy.
Affirm us. Give us value,
please. Whoever is watching. Aggie Kasparis, please tell us you like
for
us.
Sticking with us through that.
So we've actually recorded a couple of different theme tunes. So just this morning we recorded that theme tune. Aren't we talented? So, but
musical genius is what it is.
We thought that maybe that theme tune might be a little too light.
Because actually what we discuss is often quite weighty.
No, sorry. Say that again.
Yeah, often what we discuss is actually quite weighty.
It is
topic.
indeed. Yes.
It
is. And we need, therefore, an appropriate jingle to go with the weightiness. So not only did we record that bouncy version, we also recorded this. Should we have a look? So there you have it. Yeah.
So let us know in the comments which one you think should be the real.
I know you like them both.
Yeah, it will be hard to choose, obviously.
But if you were forced to choose just one of those two exceptional ditties, let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't waste our time here.
No.
This is all for the Lord.
I mean, if you've got suggestions for a style in which we could do a
Oh yeah, that's good.
a
isn't
theme
it?
tune.
Yeah, let us know.
Thrash metal next week.
I could do that.
You could
I'm
totally
down
do
with that.
that.
I could do that.
Yeah. All right, and then polka the next week, and we'll see. Good, yeah. So we are a bit rusty, so apologies to everybody for all that. We've been away doing things. I've been in Northern Ireland. I've been over this sort of week. I'm in probably the two most churched towns in all the UK. Really, I was in Coleraine, on the north coast of the Northern Ireland, and that was a very churched town. But they had about 10 churches getting together and wanting to reach out.
And you said for a population of about 40,000.
Oh, this is Bangor.
Oh,
yeah.
sorry, sorry, we're talking about
Yeah.
this. But how many in?
That's a really good question.
Do you know? But you said there was 80 churches in this.
Oh, there's something ridiculous
Something
like
like that.
in Bangor.
in
Yeah,
Bangor, which is not a.
yeah, not a huge town.
Yeah.
But it was with Coleraine. It was really interesting. They did these video vox pops of just asking random strangers in the street questions about God, life, the universe, and everything. And pretty much everyone they stopped was a Christian. And like people were like making Bible references and things. And
Yeah.
I believe it was Augustine who once said, like, "We just want the man on the street," and they were just giving us these.
These are the men and women on the streets.
Yeah.
I guess
So
that's the context of their outreach, I suppose.
yeah,
How much of that is just kind of a very nominal
yeah.
Christianity?
Yeah, there is definitely that. I mean, everywhere you go, there's got cultural Christianity, and one thing that I'm saying quite often, and that I think has an impact in a place like Coleraine, is I say I've got two rules of thumb. When I'm speaking to someone over 65 and they tell me they're a Christian, I don't believe them. I'm not rude about it, I don't poke them in the chest and say prove it, But if they're over 65 and they say they're a Christian, I'm not yet. I think there's still a conversation to be had about, well, what do you make of Jesus and that sort of thing? Because 65 years ago, it was much easier to go out into the world with a label called Christianity.
Right, yeah.
And, well, because I'm English, aren't I? So, of course, I'm a Christian. And so, if you're over 65, there's a possibility that...
Or Irish. Okay.
Or Irish, yeah. There's the possibility that it's a nominal Christianity.
Yeah.
But then I always say, and if I'm talking to you and you're under 35 and you say that you're an atheist, I don't believe you.
Right.
For the very same reason. The very same reason is that it's very possible to be a nominal atheist. And just as the Christian in years gone by sort of picked up Christianity as a label and just wore it because everyone else was, I think it's really, really common to find people who just identify as atheists. And they haven't put more than 35 seconds into this metaphysical question.
And the way they live their lives in certain areas would suggest they don't really believe.
Right. Well, you just ask them,
nothing.
So what are you praying for at the moment? And they say, well, my mother's going in for an operation.
Yes, those kind of things. There was an article, it popped up on my newsfeed. I think it was one from a few years ago. It must have been one of the memories. It was about kind of when celebrities die, and how it's like, there's nothing. And then it's like, no, now, Prince has got his, purple rain in heaven. And you're like,
right.
Hang on, what? Like,
yeah.
And all that kind of stuff. And actually how suddenly, as soon as, particularly death is a big one, we know he's up there looking over us, I know they're in a better place. And it's like, well, hang on, last week you gave me the impression you thought there was nothing.
They should update the saying. There's no atheist in foxholes. It's like there's no atheist in Facebook status updates when celebrities have died. It's not as pithy, but still true.
Factually correct.
Factually correct. So Coleraine was brilliant. So we put on a bunch of different evening events in which I spoke on the topics of hypocrisy. How come the church is full of it? And then fairy tales. Is the Bible just another myth? Suffering. How can a good God fit with a bad world? Sex. Why are Christians so weird about it? And then peace.
Did you basically just say, I'll speak on all the questions we've done for Thorny Questions?
For Thorny Questions.
Because I've got a load of material already.
Basically just did Thorny Questions. So, yeah, went well. And in fact, I think the sex one was, because when you start talking about, there was a big case in Ireland very recently. Well, it's been going on for quite a while, but the sentencing was very recently. So Paddy Jackson and Stuart Olding were two Ulster and Irish rugby stars who were arrested for rape, and they went on trial, and eventually they were acquitted, and so they were found not guilty. But then they were dropped by their teams anyway, largely because of, or the stated reason was that they had actually boasted about their sexual exploits on WhatsApp to a group of people. And what really struck me was that actually...
They're complete, legal...
Yeah, it was legal.
Exploits.
There's they've been vindicated as these legal sexual exploits. But actually, to have named them on this WhatsApp group, even euphemistically, was kind of too much, and the sponsors put massive pressure, and the team dropped them. And it just sort of struck me that we do to one another things sexually that we wouldn't even name. It's Jordan Peterson, because we can't go an episode without mentioning Jordan Peterson.
No.
But he said, isn't it interesting that these days in hookup culture, people are doing to one another things that they would never name with one another. They would never actually articulate the things that they want to happen, and yet they're doing them to one another. And I just thought it was interesting in Ireland in this trial that actually the speaking out of what had happened was the really controversial thing, and they ended up getting dropped. So anyway, speaking about that issue on the Thursday nights, you've kind of got people. I think it was a massive cultural moment, and
good way in, isn't it?
It's a good way in, and then to say, look, it's not that the church has got sex right and the world has got sex wrong. It's that Jesus has a vision of sex that's just beautiful, and everybody else gets it wrong. And just the church is just the people who gather to Jesus and say, we've got it all wrong, but what about you, Jesus? So that was really fruitful, and saw people trusting Jesus last week, and we pray that they would continue to follow him.
Great.
So yeah.
Yeah. So you've been busy then?
A little bit.
Keeping yourself busy.
Keeping myself busy, and then off to Bangor in another week's time. And yes, to probably the most churched town in the UK, but plenty of non-Christians to go around.
So that's the one with the 80 churches for 40,000 population or something. Or
they've got a bus going through, and I'm very disappointed they didn't put my face on the bus.
Oh, what?
The face on the back of the bus.
Man.
That would be something to write home about.
Yeah, totally.
But instead, it's advertising Story Bangor. You can go to storybangor.com and figure out what we're doing, and should be a good time.
Nice. Cool.
Now, I had a little bit of a rant at the top of the program about Shania Twain. Did you catch this story at all?
Oh, well, no, I didn't see it until you mentioned it to me, and then I kind of picked up it.
It caught my eye on BBC, because let's see what is the actual name, the actual headline for this story was Shania Twain apologizes after saying that she would have voted for Donald Trump. It's just interesting that's the sort of the outrageous, this spectacular, how could she possibly agree with literally half the US electorate?
Yeah. Is she Canadian?
She's Canadian. Yeah.
So they're saying, you would have thought by now celebrities would have learned just to say, what's that got to do with their knowing? Why are you asking me that? I'm not a politician.
I know.
Why does it matter?
I know, but it just struck me as so The Guardian wants to raise politics with Shania Twain, which is just ridiculous, and they want to inject Donald Trump into every news story ever, and so and it's just ridiculous that anyone cares who Shania Twain would vote for,
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Shania Twain's lovely. I'm not,
Right.
I don't really care.
She's still the one for me.
Still the one I run to. Yeah.
These jokes don't impress me much. That's
Boom.
So, but it did strike me that we've got this celebrity-obsessed outrage culture, and then of course it all orbits around an outrage-obsessed celebrity called Donald Trump, who is just I long
it's
for.
when you look at it and you think, is this news?
Yeah.
Is this really news?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's not it's not like you think you get the messages coming back on Twitter, and the people of Aleppo are deeply disturbed by Shania Twain's views.
My Facebook status update: Glen Scrivener has marked himself as safe from Shania Twain's views.
Oh man, I'm just aware that this camera is just gradually slipping down and down until we're going to be looking at a table in a minute. I don't know what we did to it. It was perfect. We were all set to go.
Man, drooping.
Yeah.
But not
There we
us. We are staying strong. So so Shania Twain, that sort of piqued my interest. Shania Twain would have voted the way that half Americans
The
would have
population
voted.
did.
Like, yeah.
Half the
You know,
population.
I'm not Donald Trump's biggest fan, but I just don't think it's a sensational news story.
It's a bit, but I wonder why they like if it was a British celebrity,
Yes.
would they ask them? I just wonder if, like, because
Yeah.
Canada and the whole kind of North America thing, obviously,
Yes.
you know, very different countries. But I mean, you think why would they wouldn't ask like an English celebrity, would they,
Yes.
about it? Like, why would they care? Like,
What's your view of Theresa May? Like,
well,
I mean, Jeremy Corbyn, you know, didn't exactly headline at Glastonbury, but he went on stage at Glastonbury. You can't imagine Theresa May doing the same.
didn't he do some Shania Twain songs?
Man, I feel like a woman, I think was one of them. But yeah, he but there are certainly politicians who it is cooler to identify with than others. You know, Justin Trudeau, I'm sure in Canada is more, you know, cool to identify with. You know,
Maybe.
I don't know.
I've seen it. I don't know. I think he's been slammed a bit recently.
But who cares? Like,
Well, exactly,
literally, it's like I was online recently. It was on some Christian website, and there was a banner advertisement for another website where you can click to find out what each celebrity believes spiritually.
Wow.
And you're like, who cares? Like, why would I care what Beyonce like does spiritually or thinks spiritually? Like,
Yeah.
is she really like? Gonna...
Wait, first of all, you just don't know, do you, whether they actually what
Yes.
they do believe?
Yes.
And then it's also like it's not like, you know, you're in the work, you know, you're in your office and you
Yes.
find out all of a sudden that
Yeah.
I don't know, Beyonce
Yeah.
is a Christian. Hey guys, turns out Beyonce's a Christian.
Except
We've got
that.
some cred now.
Yeah.
That's the credentials for Christianity.
I think Christians are far too thirsty for that. I think they do get far too keen about that. Oh, they're a Christian.
Well, wasn't there a
therefore.
big thing about, didn't Justin Bieber sing a worship song in one of his sets or something?
And doesn't he go to Hillsong in New York when he's there and things like that?
I mean,
why
I don't really
why
know.
do we know this? Like, and does it matter to us?
No. Well, it doesn't matter to me.
Doesn't matter to you.
No. Justin
No.
Bieber's not really my cup of tea musically. Like,
But you know, Slipknot or something, if they were, I don't know. Like,
I've been listening to a lot of Pink Floyd lately.
That would surprise you though if they came out as, you know, high Anglicans.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. They're clearly pondering the pointlessness of existence.
Yeah, the dark side of the moon. And, yeah.
So.
But yeah, why do we care, and why do we take our cues from these celebrities? That's really what the spiritual temperature of the culture is. Like forget what major religion we are. I tell you who are our idols, right? Our idols, you know, they're our stars, our celebrities, and we don't care that Justin Bieber follows such and such a god. Like, we just follow Justin Bieber. You know, that's the spiritual temperature of the culture, right there. See, that's pithy. Put it on a t-shirt. So the other story that sort of broke yesterday, well, it didn't break yesterday, but certainly developed yesterday. Mark Meechan, otherwise known as Count Dankula. You didn't know that?
I didn't know.
Didn't you know that? Okay.
What?
Be careful what you laugh at now, because he famously in 2016 uploaded a video to YouTube which he claims was a prank on his girlfriend. And in a second I'm going to talk to James Cary about it. James Cary's been on the podcast a number of times, comedy writer, and also very interested in free speech and freedom of expression and all those sorts of issues. And I just thought the Count Dankula Mark Meechan story was just a very important moment in which a judge ruled that he didn't care what the reasons were for Mark Meechan making his video in which a dog makes a Nazi salute. He doesn't care about the reasons for it. He doesn't care about the motivation. He doesn't care about the context. It is hate speech, and he was fined £800. And I was quite disturbed by that. James Cary was very disturbed by that. And we had a conversation about it just about an hour ago. So I hope you enjoy. James Cary, and James, you are... Oh, am I frozen?
You froze briefly.
Oh, man.
Want to start again?
Okay,
Sorry.
I'll say it again.
It says your internet connection is unstable.
What?
My internet connection shouldn't be unstable.
It said that to me. It might be talking about me. We're down here in a bunker in our sound booth, but
Okay.
we've
Mine
got-
is okay.
okay,
Okay, we'll see how we go.
we'll get there.
So I am with James Cary, who is a scriptwriter, comedy writer, and a Christian. Talk to you about freedom of speech and what we should make of this latest case of the Nazi dog video. So great to have you with us on the LIVEcast.
Thanks very much. Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. So you are the sort of person who Newsnight might phone up at short notice and say, James Cary, do you have an opinion on this latest blasphemous comment by a comedian or things like that?
It does happen sometimes.
It does happen sometimes.
Yeah.
That went back to a sort of an incident where you were interviewing Ben Elton. Can you tell us about that?
So very briefly, I did an interview for a now defunct magazine called Third Way, which is a Christian magazine, and I've never done an interview with anyone before, so I interviewed him, and we transcribed the interview and published it, and it didn't seem that he'd said anything particularly controversial, but there was a little bit that was snipped out where he talked about how he was doing a comedy, a sitcom, and he had one of the characters say something about Muhammad coming to the mountain, and which is an expression,
Right.
And they basically, the producer sort of said, "Oh, please have him say something else. Let's just not have that."
Mm-hmm.
And he expressed that the fact that the BBC have a bit of a double standard, and that he felt some element of sympathy towards Christians who feel somewhat besieged, even though he himself is an atheist. And so what he said was deemed to be controversial enough to create a 24 hours worth of outrage and indignation, whilst people pretended that the BBC do not have a double standard. But yeah, so I ended up on Newsnight, and included a thing that I was unaware of called World Have Your Say, which is a global phone-in show from the BBC World Service.
Right.
And so, yeah, obviously people have very different views across the world about these things. So that was a bit of an eye-opener.
So you were fielding people's outrage from across the globe.
Well, it's kind of, yeah. I mean, I wasn't Ben Elton's spokesman at all, particularly. I wasn't trying to necessarily defend what he was saying, but merely commenting on it. But yeah, it felt like, well, you know, as usual, 36 hours later, it was all,
Right.
it all, there was a train crash or something, and that was the
Right.
end of that.
Right.
But,
Move on to the next outrage.
yeah, no, sure.
And so this puts you in a space in which you're a Christian and you have strong views about Jesus and he's great. You're also a comedian, and you also believe in free speech. Tell me why a comedian in particular really wants to protect freedom of expression.
Well, in short terms, because otherwise you could go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we've just seen when this chap was fined. This chap has been fined £800 for training a dog to do a Nazi salute, and so therefore what he has done is technically committed a crime. Now it's a joke that I couldn't comedically defend. I mean, it's technically funny what he's done, but you know, we need to be very clear on what does and what doesn't constitute breaking the law, and what the law should and should not be.
Should we get back to basics? So tell us who Mark Meechan is, and tell us about this video.
So there's been a story about this chap called Mark Meechan, who's also known on the internet as Count Dankula, and in 2016 he posted a video on YouTube in which he thought it would be hilarious to take his girlfriend's pug dog called Buddha, who she thought was really cute, and teach it to do a Nazi salute. And he was sort of successful in that. And there's a 2-minute video where he sort of successfully manages to brainwash this dog into sort of saluting in a Sieg Heil form.
Right.
Which works as a joke. I mean, that's funny that he has irritated his girlfriend by ruining her dog.
Right.
By getting it to do something that is the least cute thing that a pug dog called Buddha could do.
Right. So the joke depends on the fact that being a Nazi is the worst thing you could be.
Yeah, exactly. Now, here's the problem. Count Dankula's personal image looks questionable because he has a particular persona and he consorts with particular people, including somebody led to his defence was Tommy Robinson, who is former head of the English Defence League, who is not a popular figure amongst the mainstream media and the literati and the Twitterati. So so when you have friends like that, people immediately start to think that you're suspicious. And it may be that he actually does have deeply unpleasant views, and that he was using this dog as a way of putting those out on the internet. But I mean, as far as the joke is concerned, that doesn't stack up, because the joke is only funny because it's such a horrible thing to do. And I was thinking about this, that there was a sense in which this is no different from The Producers, one of the most significant Broadway musicals of all time, based on a movie made in the 60s, actually quite a long time ago, and quite near to when the Nazis were doing terrible things to Jews. And the point of that is that a corrupt Broadway producer musical that will close on the first night in order to commit a large financial fraud.
Yes, because you can make more money with a play that fails than a play that,
than you can with a hit. And therefore, the fact that, so the idea is that this show has to be so tasteless that it won't even make it past the interval. The producer at one point says, no, the show has to close on page 4. And
the opening song is "Springtime for Hitler."
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I mean, it's such in terrible bad taste, and you see the audience watching it sort of absolutely open mouthed, and it's really funny because it's an incongruous image of these nice genteel theatre goers watching this celebration of the Third Reich, written by this lunatic ex-Nazi who's still in love with the Führer, and so. Now, Mel Brooks is Jewish.
Right.
And therefore, he is able to say and do things, culturally speaking, that others might not be able to do. Whether that is justified or not is obviously another issue. But I recently saw footage of him actually receiving an award for something. It may have been The Producers, and publicly thanking Hitler. So, I mean, this is a very, very complex area. And as you know, I'm writing a book about this, which will be out next year, in which I'm trying to show that in any joke, there are numerous moving parts, which makes things unbelievably complex incredibly quickly.
Yes.
So
issues of context are just all important, aren't they? So, like, who says it to whom, and what kind, who's the targets, and who are you in making that joke, and then, but actually, the sheriff or the judge in this case actually said context does not matter.
Yeah. Now that's a big worry, because I mean, I think the prosecution basically made the case that the context could not be decided by the accused, but would be decided by the court, and the sheriff, agreed with that. And that's very worrying, really, because if you're saying that the context doesn't matter, then even us discussing this video now is in itself a crime in Scotland.
Right.
So your missionary work in Scotland, Glen, may be at an end.
Goodness me.
Just from some of the things that you say in even discussing it. And there is a very provocative and funny Jonathan Pye video, which some viewers may be interested to look up, which uses language that is very much not suitable for work or the home, I would argue. But it's very splenetic in basically making the point that it's a joke, and that the context is incredibly important.
Right.
So we need to be very careful to say that the context doesn't matter. Now, the court must decide whether the context is as the accused says it was. But yeah. So there's, on one level, there's the issue of the context. But for me, the main issue is what our society does now very regularly is confuses sins with crimes. Right. Sins. So many crimes are sins. Most sins are not crimes. Right. So speeding, going at 80 miles an hour on the motorway, is a crime. It's not really it's only a sin because
preach, brother, preach.
To break the law for a Christian is a sin. Yes. Right. It's a liberty to redefine the law yourself. Right. But actually, there's nothing inherently immoral about driving at 80 miles an hour on an empty 3-lane motorway at 2 in the morning.
But don't do it, boys and girls. Don't do it.
But but that's not so. I mean, I'll be found guilty of inciting speeding.
Yeah.
But the state has decided that it is a crime to do that, regardless of whether there is other traffic, regardless of whether it is dangerous, regardless of whether it is icy, or regardless of whether you're drunk or sober. It is a crime.
Right.
Now there are reasons for that, which kind of make sense on one level. But it is worth noting that now we sometimes say, well, something is wrong, therefore it should be a crime. And you go, no. I mean, adultery is wrong,
right,
but it is legal.
Yeah, gossip is wrong.
A gossip is wrong.
Yeah, but do you want a magistrate to assess whether it was hate speech and all that kind of stuff? It's all blurring the lines, isn't it?
Now, so Dankula has received a certain amount of ostracism from people who he never liked anyway, and people, but also it would be legitimate for YouTube to have taken down the video because YouTube is a private company and they have their own rules, and so it's kind of a matter for them. But for the government to say no, what you have said. I mean, it is on the statute book, so there is a law about hate speech. So he has, in a way, committed a crime, as defined by that court now. So I just think that, and what people have said is that, so there are a number of comedian comedy writers. So, for example, Graham Linehan, the writer of Father Ted. He was a delightful man. I met him once, and he was extremely kind to me. He's basically said that this guy deserves whatever he gets. Now, now the problem with saying that people you don't like should get what they deserve by the laws of the land, need to be very careful, because soon those laws will be applied to him. Now, what if the Catholic Church had taken exception to the way in which his show portrayed the Catholic Church?
Yeah.
And what if he was then prosecuted in Ireland under laws which he would say are unjustified, but well, they're the law of the land. So you have to be careful that the laws that are squashing the people that you like will not then be used to squash you.
Does this explain why? Okay, so a lot of Christians are sort of lining up on the side of Mark Meechan on this issue.
Yeah.
But when Jerry Springer the Opera came out, and Stuart Lee and Richard Herring sort of wrote in Jesus in a nappy and all that kind of very offensive stuff, Christians kind of protested the BBC quite a lot when it was broadcast anyway. Are there significant differences in this case? Did you get that wrong?
Yeah. I mean, there are similarities. I mean, so for example, in that situation, the BBC is not YouTube. So the main issue came when the BBC bought the rights to it and then broadcast it, and so therefore the £100 or so that you pay for your license fee is now being spent on something that you don't like. Now, unfortunately, when you buy your license fee, you are purchasing a range of views, and the BBC have a job. Some say they do it well, others less so, to reflect the views of this nation. Some of whom are Christian, some of whom are not, some of whom are atheist, some of whom think religion is great, some of whom think religion is toxic or stupid, and so therefore they are well within their rights to protest. They were well within their rights to. I mean, even when people set fire to things in public, I'm always pretty dubious about that, because that tends not to end well. But people were burning their their TV licenses and stuff, and you think, I'm not sure they want to do that. But they're at liberty to do it, and if they think they should do it, well, then they should do it. That's fine. It's not a crime to do that. So I think people can robustly make their case, and people can robustly defend themselves. The problem is when the coercive power of the state intervenes to say, this is right, this is wrong, you go to jail now. And I think that is something that the Christians particularly should be very, very dubious about leading us towards, because the gospel is pretty offensive, and the outworkings of the gospel as revealed in Scripture are, shall we say, countercultural at best, and toxic and bigoted at worst, in the views of some. And so I think Christians are now realizing that the Leviathan of the state is something that we want to be pretty careful
Having
about,
ridden it for so long.
absolutely. Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, that's the thing, and,
Yeah.
and we have been used to being the dominant power, culturally speaking, in our nation's history, and we've not done that particularly well at various points. So there's lots of things that we have done poorly. So yeah, so it is incredibly complicated.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a joke, but ultimately, I mean, it's the Zeke Heil dog. I mean, on paper, it's funny. It's a funny joke.
In that it's subverting your expectations and turning things upside down.
Yeah.
And
when you watch the video, I watched it properly all the way through this morning, and it's a hard watch because he says certain things and uses certain phrases that are horrible.
Very horrible.
Yeah, but in a way that's the joke, as much as the actual Nazi saluting pug dog. So yeah, it's a joke that I wouldn't do.
Yes.
Offended by, but it's not a joke that I think is worthy of an £800 fine and the intervention of the state.
Yeah.
I just probably wouldn't really be friends with him.
Right. Right.
But for some, that's not enough because of the way society is now worked out. We want the law now to do things that actually previously society at large would do rather than the state.
And it would largely do them through thick communities, and there's such a thing as shame, and there's shame and honor, and let's not give the ring of power to the states, because we might find that they're not the best keeper of the ring. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, no, exactly. Their track record on the use of power is also pretty poor at times.
Yeah. So just briefly as we close, like, what's your general policy on blasphemy in general? I mean, obviously, as a Christian, when you hear Jesus mocked, that saddens you. Maybe it angers you. I don't know. But where does that thought lead you as you look out at a culture in which we're in a pluralistic society and different people have different values? How should we think as Christians about blasphemy?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I often say is that there is a very strong biblical theme of minding your own business. So there is a lot of verses which start, "But as for you," and in a way, we would do well not to blaspheme ourselves. And I think that is our primary responsibility,
right,
is to make sure that we are not blaspheming. And we are at liberty to show our disapproval when others blaspheme, and that's fine. If they don't want to listen, they don't want to listen. The problem is when we become angrier than God about the misuse of his name, which can occasionally happen. So, for example, in particular, the people that the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were actually holier than Jesus. And the moment we sort of start to go down that road, we want to be a little bit careful that our holiness or our desire for God's name doesn't turn into sanctimony and turn into Pharisaism. So, and in our anger, even in our potentially in our righteous anger, that is very easy for us to do things we shouldn't do and to say things we don't mean, or at least we shouldn't mean. So, for example, if you don't like hearing blasphemy on the BBC, you should write and tell them.
Right.
And that's fine. And if they get enough letters, they will actually assume that people really don't want to hear blasphemy on television. Now, obviously, the problem comes when you have fictional characters and fictional situations doing things and saying things which the writer is not in himself condoning. Right. So in a show that I wrote about soldiers, I had a chaplain, a padre, and people used to make jokes about her and to her face as well about her stupid religion. Now, I wrote some of those jokes,
right?
But I have to be truthful to the situation that is what would happen in that situation. Now, if a viewer is offended by those jokes, a Christian viewer in particular is offended by those jokes, then there's sort of nothing I can do about that. And it's good to be offended. It's not a sin to be offended. In actual fact, if you're never offended, I would be worried that you're some kind of sociopath.
Right.
So I think sometimes we mistake our consciences being aroused for something that we've done wrong, and actually we haven't done anything wrong. How we respond to that
Yes.
is really important. And sometimes we can respond to that with anger rather than righteous anger, or with indignation. And at which point we need to be a little bit careful before we start making placards and demanding people go to jail.
I'm always struck by Romans 2, you know, God's name is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you, God's people.
Right.
Like, wow, that's really confronting, isn't it? You know, you have made the name of Jesus more mockable because of the way you've carried yourself in the world.
Yeah.
So the first
absolutely.
person to look at is yourself.
Yeah. So the way in which God deals with blasphemy in the Bible is really interesting. What he doesn't do is send thunderbolts from the sky. And the time that he does, one of the few times he does do that, is over money, not blasphemy, with Ananias and Sapphira withholding, claiming they've been more generous than they actually have been. And so it seems that God goes all in on that one, rather than the blaspheming of his name. So it is puzzling, and our priorities, even when we think that we're doing the right thing, are not always God's priorities.
Right.
So we need to be a little bit careful before we march on Parliament and demand changes to laws.
And just as we finish, are there any sort of hopeful signs for Christians and free speech? You know, I mean, I think back to, you know, Je suis Charlie, and, you know, in the outbreak of that, people were sort of quoting Voltaire left, right, and center. You know, I don't agree with what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. Do you think there is a bit of a resurgence in free speech, and do you think Christians can kind of take advantage of that?
No. I'm not terribly optimistic about free speech, especially in this country. In America, they have the Second Amendment, which protects them. First Amendment, sorry. One is guns, one is speech.
Yes.
I'm more ambivalent on guns, but yeah, no. I think, unfortunately, because also the way in which we discuss speech and free speech, it's sort of ironic that television in particular is incredibly bad at discussing television.
Right.
It's very good at storytelling, but it's very bad at analysis, because your eyes get bored very quickly of just people talking. And so I think in our sort of hysterical tweeting soundbite culture, we do this stuff very badly. And with the Je suis Charlie thing, I mean, the amount of hypocrisy based on that, when a whole load of world leaders sort of march together defending, you know, and saying Je suis Charlie, but basically saying, well, they shouldn't have published those cartoons. They kind of brought this on themselves, and that what they did was irresponsible. You go, oh, right. So je ne suis pas Charlie, in fact. So, you know, I tend to be fairly gloomy about the current trajectory, but at least it is now being discussed in ways. But unfortunately, you know, Count Dankula is not a great person to put on your posters as a defense of free speech, because as jokes go, that's socially a hard one to defend.
Right. Well, I tried to finish on a high, but James, you just
sorry. Yeah, I know. But that's the world as it is.
You bring a comedy writer onto the show, and he just brings everybody down.
We are the worst for that. I'm so sorry.
What a downer. Great to have you on the show, and we'd love to talk to you again when your book comes out next year. It'll be great to talk about. But
cool.
James Cary, thanks so much.
Cheers, Glen.
Cheers. And then we'll stop.
Right, we're back.
And we're back.
We've slanted and we've disappeared.
We should go this way or that way. Just hello. Hey. We're being more empathetic. And how did that make you feel?
Let's get the close up. Let's try the close up. Yeah.
Hey. Something's definitely gone off kilter there.
Yeah, we're having a few issues here.
Very good.
Generally with things.
Ben Lauer just said, helpful distinction between sins and crimes. Yeah, absolutely. You know, gossip is a sin. Let's not put it on the statute books. You know, like, who's then going to be in charge of prosecuting gossip? You know, it's like,
yeah. I mean, the thing I thought was fascinating there is that it's saying that what you say is not context dependent.
Wow.
Which is massive.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it makes me think, and I've pondered it a few times, I remember seeing an interview with it was Samuel L. Jackson talking to a news reporter in the States, and it was all to do with the use of the N-word.
Right.
And of course, there's a white news reporter, Samuel L. Jackson, obviously a black guy, and he's asking about this, and the white guy keeps saying he refers to it as the N-word, and Samuel L. Jackson is saying, just say it, say the word.
Right. Wow.
And he's like, you're not using it. He's not using it in the context of an abusive way. I mean, even I'm reticent to use it now. Cause
Are we sure that we are being heard by people?
I think we are. The mic should be on.
Okay,
yeah.
on. Okay. Yeah. Say the N-word.
Yeah. And he's basically going, look, say it.
Yeah.
But, so imagine if we're, I mean, I'm trying to think of another example. But, I mean, if context doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
Then surely, even the prosecution or the defense can't even use the words that are said by the defendant.
How do you even describe the crime?
if you go, well, that's hate speech, you've just said it.
Right.
Oh, I'm just using it to defend.
Right.
No. Context doesn't matter.
Right.
And suddenly you're pushing down quite a dangerous road, aren't you?
Yeah. It's like Mike Reeves. Hello.
Still here.
Whoa. Mike Reeves said that. So I was at a great day at Worthing Tabernacle. Where we were discussing Charles Spurgeon, and in a Q&A session, Mike Reeves, who is the president of Union, and is a professor of theology there, he said, yes, actually, I teach heresy at Union. You're like, what? You teach heresy? He says,
I did the course.
Yeah, that's right. This explains a lot. And he said, I let people know what Arius believed, and I teach what he believed, but I don't. If I preach heresy, that's different.
It's a different thing.
And I think there is that distinction to be made. Let me help you out.
Oh dear. Andy, come back. We need tech support.
Andy's been on sabbatical. How's that?
Everything's falling apart. We joked. We did joke before Andy left that if after 8 weeks we found that we could cope without him, we'd just be like, oh, don't worry, Andy.
Well,
I think that's very obvious. That's not the case.
Proof positive. And if you're listening on the podcast, you really need to subscribe.
Yeah, you can check this out on YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube.
It's a real different angle on things.
So anyway, that's the difference. Yes, you're disappearing, says Biddy Mutter. Well, I mean,
many people would say that was better.
That's a better thing. I should be seen and not heard. Or rather the other way around. So, yes, we shall see what happens. But James was not very positive about our tolerance for freedom of expression anymore.
I mean, and what is there? Is there a... yeah, just cut to me there on the camera. What is the... Is there a particular statute on the books as to what defines hate speech?
Sure. I just don't know what it is, but yeah.
Right, okay. Well, if anyone knows, and you know in the comments, do let us know, because it'd be fascinating to know where the line is drawn, and how do you define that? Because, there are... And the reason, just in case people, people are struggling to understand why we're even talking about this, because I think, as James touched upon, there are things that we would say as Christians that in the best light people would say that's outdated and we don't believe it, and in the worst light it's bigoted and hates hate speech.
Right. Right.
And so,
and the problem with hate speech rules is you've got to somehow have a window into somebody's heart to know that they hated the other person, So if I read out a verse about homosexuality and someone was offended and thought I therefore hated homosexuals, they would have to know that. You know what?
Tell you what,
I'm gonna hold it.
Just
I'm gonna hold it. Here we go. I've got you. You got me.
It's like we're all here. Woo!
Hey. What's you?
There I am.
That works.
In full glorious HD.
There we go. The trouble... You're going to edit this out for the podcast now.
There's going to be a lot of editing at this rate.
There's going to be a lot of editing. The problem with hate speech is you've got to have a window into somebody's heart and understand what their intentions are, and how on earth is a judge from on high meant to judge what your intentions really were with somebody.
And I think what's almost worse about this one is that he didn't even say basically what he said was the intention doesn't matter.
Right.
It was like, it's what you said.
Yeah, it's what
and,
the court
and,
says.
and that's more scary, isn't it? Because at least if someone was saying, let's work out the intention,
Right.
so, it happens in school, doesn't it? The playground, someone said something and someone gets upset.
didn't
And so
mean
I don't think they meant it
Right.
in a way that was hurtful. And you can maybe get to the root of it and work it out, and that's so kind of okay. But once you start saying, doesn't matter what your intention was.
Just don't go down this route. Just this whole hate speech route, just don't go down it. It's like we're tap dancing in a minefield with clown shoes. And this one is like, the bomb's gone off after 300 steps, and some people are saying, let's only take 299 steps into the minefield. Like, how about we just steer clear of the minefield? How about we just, which, kind of makes you a free speech absolutist, which is a bit, it sounds like a scary thing to be, but I think the alternative is to give the ring of power to the state so that the state now is sitting in judgment upon you and is sitting in judgment on your motives. They're playing the place of God.
Yeah.
Basically.
I mean, I generally think, I kind of just think that you should be able to, free speech is an absolute thing. If you're going to have it, you should be allowed to say anything, regardless of how offensive it is. Because at the end of the day, I mean, you don't have to, everyone is, being offended is a subjective thing.
Right.
So like what offends you might not offend me, and so on and so forth. So how could you even possibly start saying, well, this is off limits and this is okay and that's not? I mean, there are definitely lots of, as a Christian, there are lots of things I would say, I don't think you should be saying those things.
Right.
But I don't think it should be illegal.
Yeah, you don't call the cops.
Pretty much anything you like.
Yeah.
And part of the reason is not because I don't not because I think those things are all good things when people say those things, but because I know that very equally it could be flipped round and used on me, just like he was talking about there with Graham. Is it Graham Linehan?
Graham Linehan, yeah.
And actually, the Catholic Church could have turned around and said,
right,
well, hang on a second, your portrayal is very offensive of the Catholic Church and blasphemous.
Right.
So let's get the state down on you.
Yeah.
And everyone loves the state when it's on their side.
Right.
But
right. And, and Christians had it on their side for like 1,000 years. So, like, for us to now be, I don't think the state should meddle in these sorts of things. Like, I can understand when secular people say, that's very convenient now. Yeah. Now that the shoe's on the other foot, you want to get the state out of these matters. So we've got a lot of repenting to do.
And also, I think sometimes as Christians, we get this wrong so often that we almost think that if we make society adhere to our moral values,
right,
we're somehow moralizing them into the kingdom.
Right.
But we know that's nonsense. If we start legislating.
Yeah.
I mean, if it became the law tomorrow that everybody had to be Christian and go to church on Sunday,
has the kingdom won
or
lost?
Have we really gained anyone?
Yeah. No.
Probably not.
No, and because our mission is a speech mission, therefore, we should really be the first ones to be defending free speech, because literally we don't want to force people into anything because we're a movement of faith and you cannot compel faith. You can only try to persuade people. Therefore, speech is our mission to the world. Therefore, we should be absolutely on the front lines of these free speech things, which might sound like a really odd coalition to be standing up against Count Dankula. And saying, he should be allowed to make his videos, but actually, given what our mission is, which is a speech mission that the world hates, then actually we should stand right alongside these people in principle and say you have the right to say things that others find offensive, So,
yeah. I mean, where's that phrase come from? I don't agree with what you say, but I defend
your right to the death for you to say it. So Voltaire, I think, famously said it, and it came out in the Charlie Hebdo stuff, and everyone was quoting it, but not really meaning it.
It's convenient hashtag bandwagon to jump on for people.
And actually, when people like the first thing I ever knew about Charlie Hebdo was when the tragedy of shooting up the offices, and then you start to look at these cartoons, you're like, oh, this is a bit on the nose, and it is massively on the nose. And I think people signed up to the Je suis Charlie, hashtag without knowing, oh yikes, but they can be offensive. Like, that's the price of free speech, and we should be on its side. I reckon that should do us. For today.
Well, I mean, we were going to talk about our thorny questions.
Yeah.
From previous weeks, but I fear your arm might drop off.
Yeah. Oh, look.
Look at that. Hey, it's no matter which camera,
Infinity.
it's always you, isn't it? Always you, Glen.
It's always me.
More you. Yep.
So, yes, we have we talked on Thorny? Have we talked about
We haven't talked
other
at all
religions'
about
Thornies?
our last two, which were, is it arrogant to say that Christianity is right, and what about other faiths?
Okay.
Or aren't all religions the same, was it?
Right.
And so actually it'd be good to revisit those.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of good stuff in there, I think.
Yeah.
Not to blow our own trumpets, but what we said was pretty
Your
good.
stuff was on the money. And we've got links to that in the comment section of the Facebook Livecast, so you can check out our latest Thorny question, Aren't All Religions the Same? Which has a brilliant bit from William Shatner in it.
It's worth it just to see William Shatner.
It really is.
Basically, tune in for that.
His spoken word. But we'll have to do this another time because I think that's all that people can cope with for today.
That's all I can cope with. This car crash of a live cast, basically. Like...
It'll all come out in the edit. So stay tuned on YouTube. We'll upload some version of this, and the podcast will come out on Friday. And you can hear James Cary all over again. And he is worth the admission price.
Very good.
Even if we were not. But thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. It's been great to be with you. And we will have our livecast next week on Monday. Not Tuesday, but Monday, 1 p.m. GMT. And
hopefully,
if we get it all together.
Yeah. And is Andy back that week?
He might even be back. Ooh. Wouldn't that be
There
good? Shall we go out on the sad?
I was about to say,
Yeah.
should we end on this note?
Okay.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right.
Well, thank you very much.
God bless. See you next week.
LIVEcast.